I spoke to Tom Kenny last fall when the SpongeBob movie opened in theaters. Let me ask you to describe SpongeBob for someone who's never seen the cartoon.
Oh, wow. Yeah. SpongeBob SquarePants is a little square kitchen sponge, even though he was born of sea sponges. It's kind of an accident of nature. But he lives in a pineapple under the sea, works in a fast food restaurant called the Krusty Krab in the undersea community of Bikini Bottom. What else can I tell you? He pals around with an incredibly dim starfish named Patrick Star, has a crabby neighbor named Squidward Tentacles who lives in a giant tiki head next door to him. He's incurably optimistic and enthusiastic and kinetic and yeah, and he has a cartoon show on Nickelodeon.
Now, if you're doing a voice for, say, a cartoon animal, animals make noises, so you can maybe base your voice on like a cat's meow or a dog's bark or a bear's growl or something. If you're doing the voice of a human character, humans really speak. If you're doing the voice of a sponge, there's really like nothing in nature to base that on. So how did you figure out what voice you wanted to use?
Which is actually very freeing in a way because there's no template. So it's kind of a wide open road. But when it came time to come up with a voice, it was just a matter of finding a voice that was childlike and maybe childish, but not a child, non-age specific, enthusiastic, and just kind of weird. And we've finally settled on this elfish helium voice that SpongeBob wound up being. And this weird. That was the fun part, was before it was even a pitch or even a show, and we were just sitting in coffee shops, irritating people at other tables, going, what would he laugh like? What would his laugh be like? And, how about a dolphin? How about kind of like a dolphin? Like Flipper used to. Yeah, that's good. And it was really a blast.
You mentioned like the voice sounds as if it's on helium. Have you ever inhaled helium to see what it would do to your voice?
It's funny you should mention that. In the 7-minute pilot episode that we did, which, as far as we were concerned, might be the only episode of SpongeBob ever made, there was a school of anchovies that invade SpongeBob's restaurant, and just this big school of like locusts, that just descend on the restaurant and go and Steve Hillenberg actually brought a tank of helium into the studio, and all of us voice actors just suck on it. And it was just, that was the pilot. So I said, boy, if this thing goes, we are going to have a lot of fun.
So did it help to hear what your voice sounded like on helium? Did you learn something about your voice you didn't know before?
Yeah, I learned that I don't really need the helium.
Because it's pretty easy to flick that switch and go right up there.
Were there voices you came up with for SpongeBob that you rejected?
Oh yeah, it's all hit and miss on any animated character in any animated show. You're trying to dial in a voice that the creator is hearing in his head, and in the case of SpongeBob and a lot of the shows I've worked on, really it's a matter of just letting yourself be dialed in like a radio or something, with the creator going, okay, no, little, add 20 pounds. Okay, now 5 years younger, and maybe he has a deviated septum. Okay, yeah, and it really is hit or miss. You're zeroing in on this target, and when it hits, it's pretty obvious.
Okay,
you just know.
Could you do that for me? Could you add 20 pounds to SpongeBob's voice?
Yeah, which when he absorbs water, I guess it's water weight.
I have a tendency to retain water, Terry. This is SpongeBob on a I'm feeling very obese and very large today.
And make him 5 years younger.
Make him 5 years younger? This is SpongeBob as a child. I am in sponge kindergarten.
Deviated septum?
Deviated septum. I don't know what that means. I'm just a dumb sponge.
No, the movie, the SpongeBob movie, is kind of a musical. There's a bunch of songs in it. You sing a couple, and one of the songs you sing in the movie is called "The Best Day Ever." Before we hear it, can you talk a little bit about what it's like to sing in character?
Yeah, that's a good question. Boy, I've never talked about that before. Some voices really lend themselves to singing, and even though I didn't really think about it ahead of time, it's just serendipitous that
SpongeBob did. It's pretty easy to sing in that voice. La 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 My dog has fleas.
But, there are other voices that I've done where I'm just so glad I don't have to sing in them. If you're doing that guy, there's not a lot of not a lot of Sondheim-like range that you can tap into. But yeah, SpongeBob really, really is fun to sing as. It's sort of like a weird mix between, Jerry Lewis and the guy from the schlock 70s band Styx. It's kind of
Babe, I'm leaving. Must be on my way.
it's very weird.
Where do you place that voice in your head?
In my boy, that I would have to say that if I were going to draw a circle around the target area, it would be somewhere between my fairly sizable proboscis and my thorax.
It's definitely up in the nasal cavity, back of the throat area, and Bill Fagerbakke that does the voice of, or it's Fagerbach or Fagerbakke. He's never told me how to pronounce his name. He says whatever. I'm not fussy. Whatever. But his voice as Patrick is just all pushed down right into his big barrel chest.
And then SpongeBob is way up here.
So it's kind of a neat contrast between SpongeBob and Patrick Starfish.
Now, you do the voices of several other characters, smaller characters, in the SpongeBob movie. Tell us about some of those characters and the voices you came up with.
Oh, gosh. Let's see. I've always done, SpongeBob has a pet sea snail named Gary that meows like a cat for reasons that are never explained on the show. And I think just because I was around early on, I've been meowing for Gary for 5 seasons. Meow, meow, meow. And they still record all his meows. I go, you guys have to have a library of every type of meow imaginable. Why are we still recording the meow?